Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another deck profile. Today we're here with Matt Sublett. We're going to go over his top 16 Invoker deck from PPG Miami. How's it going today, man?
It's going pretty good, man. How about yourself?
I can't complain. I can't complain. So, actually, with this list, you ended up first after Swiss, I believe, right?
That's correct, yeah.
So definitely a really strong showing. Yeah, definitely a really strong showing with the deck. One of the funny things I think about Invoker in particular, which obviously we'll get into a lot of stuff with Invoker in this video, but you know, Dark Broly, definitely one of the top decks of the meta, if not the best deck. But Invoker has such a great Dark Broly matchup. Do you view things the same way? And did you play against a lot of Dark Broly in the tournament?
Yeah, Invoker definitely has a very positive matchup against Dark Broly, especially game one, because, you know, we main 4 Violent Rays, and that really slows down Dark Broly. And if they don't have any kind of like Super Kamehameha type answers, they put themselves to 4, and it's a very quick end on turn 5. I did end up playing against 2 Dark Brolys, actually, round 2 and round 6. So it worked out pretty well there.
Gotcha. And then as far as some other matchups in the meta, how do you feel Invoker fares? Like the other popular decks being Launch, King Piccolo, Mecha to a degree. What do you think about those matchups?
Well, so especially if considering game one, Invoker has a positive matchup across the meta against every deck except Red Broly. It has an extremely negative matchup against Red Broly. Honestly, you're looking at, you know, and this is a made up percentage, but in all honesty, about 10 or 15% chance of coming out of that one with a win game one. Post side deck, generally people have some kind of an answer for Invoker, even if it's just in the form of Broken Seal, the Mechikabura 2-drop. And so it reduces your win percentage a little bit games 2 and 3, but you can correct for that with the side deck. Generally speaking, I think Invoker has the best spread in the meta.
Very interesting. Yeah, I definitely think that what you said about Red Broly is true. Like, I think, you know, a lot of people don't like these diverse metas because then you run into a lot of matchup variance, right? And sometimes you can run into an auto loss matchup. I really don't feel like this meta has a ton of auto losses, but I definitely have also seen that Red Broly versus Invoker seems to be one of the most lopsided matchups. So I definitely agree with you there. And then having a positive spread across the board too, I mean, that's obviously a really good thing for Invoker. Not a lot of people play it. There's somewhat of a price gap, you know, for people that want to get into this deck with the Victory Strike and whatnot. But definitely seems like a solid deck. I know you definitely like Control. I know you've played Victory Strike almost your entire career in the game, right?
Absolutely. If the deck has a secret rare that says Victory Strike, I am down to play it.
Very cool.
I've never been a fan of aggro decks. I don't think they're very fun or interactive. And you can argue that Catastrophic Blow isn't very fun or interactive, but I still have to make it to turn 5. It's better than turn 2.
Yeah, everyone has their playstyles they enjoy for sure. Some people like Control, some people like aggro, some people like mid-range. Let's take a look at what we got in the main deck here. So we got 4 Beerus Divine Obliterator and 4 Inspired Technique. So 2 questions here. I'll start with Beerus first. So you're playing 4 Beerus, and you're actually not playing Cooler in the main, which I find very interesting because it seems like Cooler has become a main staple in Invoker. You're opting to sideboard it, and we will look at the sideboard later. What's the logic behind that?
So I don't like Cooler. He felt like a necessity to the deck, and he was the weakest link in it. So he's the thing that I wanted to replace in the deck, basically. I wanted to challenge his necessity. And so in a recent tournament, it was the best of one, the Bandai one, where you could win a Denial of Hope. I don't remember the name of it. I ended up cutting Cooler from the main deck and instead opting to go with Instinctive Reprisals, because Instinctive Reprisal is a spell which increases my consistency when I have to randomly banish a spell from the warp, or from the drop to the warp. It increases my number of negates in the deck. Cooler, I actually have to let them get to the combo phase, whereas Reprisal stops that. And going against Dark Broly main decking things like the 1-drop Goku, fighting against Fate, I think is what he's called. Cooler can't clear that if they attack with it. It'll buff itself to 15 for the turn, and Cooler only -10s it. If I use Instinctive Reprisal, it will clear it. And I'm still I warp a card just like I would have to discard the Super Combo to play the Cooler. So there's no difference there. And so in testing in that tournament, I found that I did not miss Cooler at all. There was no love lost, essentially. And
Gotcha.
So I opted to continue that going forward. And really, I don't regret it at all. I think Cooler is now a side deck staple, not a main deck staple.
Gotcha. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. You know, I think I've talked to other Invoker players, done a few other profiles on the channel, and they really like Cooler for the Red Broly matchup. Red Broly, though, being much less popular in the meta now, definitely seems like you can afford to throw it at the sideboard.
Also, if you consider trying to increase your win percentage against a deck that you lose the vast majority of the time, just to decrease your win percentage against other decks where you're winning, it's not worth it. Sometimes you just have to take the L.
Yeah, that makes sense, and especially again when it's not a super popular deck. But yeah, just make your deck the best for the general field, and then when you come across that matchup, yeah, you have your sideboard text for that. And then this being the rest of the win condition package, obviously we've got the 4 Rival Seeker, the 3 Energy Explosion, the 1 Victory Strike. I really like your number on the 3 Energy Explosion. I've seen a lot of lists play 2, and obviously those lists are making concessions to play the Cooler in the main deck. But I like your number at 3 because if you have to charge 1 early or whatnot, like sometimes 2 can be a little risky. I've seen Invoker players not draw the Energy Explosion when they need it, so I do like the number on that. And that's all the battle cards in the deck. So the rest of the deck's going to be extra cards. But anything you want to say before we move into that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess Legends would be the other Invoker player, and he opts to go with a 3-2 split, 3-2 split on the Vegeta Goku. I like the 4-3. Just I'm not brazen enough to go into a tournament with 2 6-drops. I'm really not.
Right, it's risky, yeah.
Absolutely. Sometimes you have to charge it. Sometimes you have to awaken with it, and sometimes with TOP, it's got to go to the bottom of the deck. And if that happens, your last one's just another Victory Strike at that point. It's just a secret rare, and you got to hope to see it. And with Vegeta, you know, yeah, it's true. When you get to turn 3, there's a good chance how far you dig through your deck, you'll have Vegeta. But there is no better card in this deck to charge than Vegeta. There is no better card to awaken with than Vegeta. And so by playing 4 of him, I kind of simplify the micro decisions a little bit as far as charging and awakening. And ultimately, that will carry on throughout the tournament, throughout the games, and that consistency that I'm granting the deck helps at least me get through things, you know.
Gotcha. All right, going into the extra cards here, we got 4 TOP Arena. One of the more recent developments, I guess, like in set 11-ish, set 12, is no one's playing Whis anymore. How do you feel about that? Did you play Whis when this deck first came out? Do you miss it? Have you ever missed TOP Arena? That kind of thing. How do you feel about, you know, not having a way to search TOP Arena nowadays?
Right, so Whis is a trap anymore. And the simple thing is that it sets you back 2 turns. It feels like it sets you back 1 because you play it on turn 1, and then you get to play top on turn 2. And you're not set back 2 turns, but you are. Because you tap 1 mana for the Whis, so you're tapped out on turn 1. On turn 2, you charge a multicolor, comes in exhausted. So then you tap your other energy for the arena, you're tapped out. So the simple reason that you played Whis just for that Tournament of Power arena has probably led you to lose the game. And so Whis is just, the meta is too fast for a card like Whis, and the deck is not as reliant on arena to need it like that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so I've actually heard Legends, I think, say, like, if you don't see TOP Arena, you lose, but you just hard mull for it. So you're saying kind of the opposite? Like, even if you don't see it early, you don't necessarily just auto-lose?
Oh, so you absolutely hard mull for Tournament of Power Arena.
Right.
You want to see it turn 1 every game. If you get to sculpt a hand, your sculpted hand is a blue mana, a TOP, and literally any 4 other cards, you're happy.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to understand, it's a 4 of in a 50-card deck. You have, what, 40.6% chance, I think it is, seeing it
right
in your opening hand. And if you mull all 6 back and draw 6 new ones, it's the same percentage. And so you've got about a 41% chance. Less than half of the time, you're not going to have Tournament of Power Arena. So that means you have to, if you want to play this deck, get good without it. You have to understand how to play games without Arena on turn 1. Because if you're relying on the deck to have Tournament of Power Arena on turn 1, you're not going to have a good time with this deck.
Fair enough. We've got 40 Magic, we got 4 Violent Rays, and only 3 Beans. So I can see, you know, Bean being a very weird card in Invoker. I'm not much of an Invoker player myself. I do test the deck, obviously, just to be prep for the meta. But Sense Bean, it's got its good matchups and its bad matchups. You know, it seems good against King Piccolo. Seems good kind of maybe against Launch. You know, these lower to the ground decks, like Vegex as well. But you're opting to play 3, so how did 3 work out for you?
3 worked out fine. I've never wanted a 4th one, honestly. The matchups where you need Bean generally are turn 4, turn 5. You'll see 1 or 2. Just hold on to it if you need to. Most of the time, I like to use Bean in combination with Raise, because Violent Raise plus Sensu Bean is your opponent passing their turn, generally.
Right, and there's also some offensive combos where you can actually do some neat things with Rival Seeker, right? But as long as you, like you said, as long as you see 1 or 2 around like turn 5, you're probably good to go, right?
Yeah, so the cute offensive things you can do would be like what Legends did on stream at one of the PPG tournaments. You hold your Awaken until turn 5, you play Victory Strike, Awaken, double Bean is the Cat Blow combo. But this meta doesn't allow that to happen anymore. Unless you're going against a green deck, you're Awakening on turn 4 so you can look at their hand and know what to stop and how to do it.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
And then for the rest of the extra cards, these are just really the ones you play. Well, for one, obviously, Cat Blow, broken. Death Beam, broken. I hear from a lot of Invoker players nowadays that like Royal Condemnation is very, very lackluster. You just play it for the fact that you can scry, right? Have you found good usage in this card, or is it really just for the scry?
It's just for the scry. Royal Condemnation is fantastic, but the very fact it exists means your opponent will play around it every single turn, so you don't actually need it in your hand. You want to have it on the off chance that they forget about it, which never happens, especially in a high competitive environment. And you want to have it so you can discard it. So the scry effect is the reason that it's at 4.
Gotcha. And then we're in this together. You know, it serves a good purpose in this deck. It's a weird card though, right? Because you kind of want to see it so you can 1, loop with your leader. 2, there's many decks actually that go wide. You can use the board wipe, Mecha Frieza, King Piccolo, stuff like that. But did you ever wish? I know you have 1 in the side deck, but did you ever wish you had the 2nd in the main?
No. So in an aggro meta, more than 1 we're in this together is risky because you don't actually want it to be your turn 2 play. You don't want to tap a mana to add it back. So the theory is you have a higher chance of seeing Tournament of Power Arena on 2 than you do on 1. And so you get into the Whist situation where you would tap yourself out by adding this card to your hand. And so because our meta is very aggro right now, I only main deck 1 and the 2nd copy lives in the side deck for the slower matches or the matches where it's absolutely necessary.
Gotcha. And then just wrapping up the extra cards, 2 combo attack, 2 instant reprisal. You did already go into that with the cooler thing. And then 2 Sleepy Boy. Sleepy Boy is such a weird one for me because it seems like something you want to play an automatic 4 of. But like you said, and I've seen other people say as well, you know, you're not really allowed to get there. You're not really allowed to get to like a super comfortable point with Vegeta and just resolve like multiple Sleepy Boys, right? So definitely seems like a good number. But this should be wrapping up the main deck. So anything else you want to talk about with the main deck?
Well, while you have these 3 up, this is actually the perfect little segue into the side deck. These are my kind of flex slots. And you'll see when we get into the side deck that I'm actually siding an extra Sleepy Boy and another We're in This Together and a couple other extra cards. Basically what I do is I change the ratio of these 3 cards in my main deck to fit the deck that I'm up against.
Gotcha. Okay, so when we go to the side deck, you'll be able to explain like this comes in for this, that comes in for that kind of thing, right?
Basically, yeah.
Cool. All right, so going into the side deck, I know you always side deck 1 copy of Broly Rampaging Horror. You always play the SPR. It's a beautiful card, I understand. But then, yeah, so I'll just kind of let you walk us through the side deck.
All right, first off, I appreciate you putting the SPR picture there.
I know that's why you side it, so that's why I put it. Yep.
All right, and so the 4 spells I was talking about a moment ago were the 2 Tyranny's Cost, the Sleepy Boy, and the We're in This Together. In the slower, more greedy matchups like Mecha Frieza or Blue, any blue deck in general, basically, you don't need Instinctive Reprisal, and instead Tyranny's Cost is better because it gives you the time to play it. And sometimes when you play it against Mecha Frieza, they lose 4 cards out of their hand. A lot of greed, and your opponent discards 4 cards. It's fantastic. Sign me up for that. The 3rd Sleepy Boy is in there for when Vegeta can't be answered. If it's a match where they just cannot answer Vegeta no matter what, you know they don't have anything or you feel like they didn't prepare for it, you put in the 3rd Sleepy Boy because you will establish Vegeta and be able to play more than 1. And We're in This Together is for the hand destruction matchups mostly, is when the 2nd copy comes in. Not really anything else because the board wipe is really hard to pull off in this deck. You generally will have to play Vegeta, Awaken, and tap out to do it, or attack and play a Sensu Bean. And so it's really hard to get the board wipe effect to actually go off effectively. And then we have the 2 coolers. These go in against things like Dark Broly. If they're putting in some 1-drops, you might want to put a cooler in, but most of the time you're just negging on card advantage because they warp it anyway. So generally I put this card in for Launch and Vegex. An interesting thing, a lot of the Dark Brolys in the room were actually side decking the Vegeta instead of the Goku. Well, in addition to the Goku,
the one that punishes you for untapping, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And so their idea with that is, well, now you can't cooler me, because if you do, you still lose the card. And Reprisal doesn't care about that and just clears them. Never got to test it out because none of the Dark Broly players I played against sided it. But that was another part of the idea of replacing cooler with that card. And then we have 2 Topo. You might notice I don't have Unending Awakening in my side deck.
I was gonna ask about that, yeah.
Yeah. So the idea with that is when Violent Raise is bad, you put in Unending Awakening. And that's wonderful. But the problem is Violent Raise is a turn ender and Unending Awakening is not. And any deck that swings in with a bunch of 15Ks, I promise you, they can make them 20s if they want to. And so you beam your leader and you negate an attack. Fantastic. They swing with a 20. You take it. Because you are no longer, you're not running a deck where you have 0 mana 5Ks that you can just discard. Now, back in the day, if you Sensu Beaned your leader, your opponent swings with a 15 and combos a card, then you combo a card. That's an even loss of resources. And so on defense, that's much stronger. In Invoker, it is meaningless because a 20K does just as much damage. And so you need another Bean or you need another Unending. And it's just, you can't stop the aggression. It just doesn't do the same thing. Topo, on the other hand, is a turn ender that stops those 15Ks from attacking. And also, he baits answers to Rival Seeker. So like King Piccolo, for example, puts in that Omen card.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember what it's called.
Yeah, Omen of Awakening, yep.
Yeah. Denial of Hope 2.0. And it stops Topo, but they have a limited number of those. And so if you can make them use it on a Topo, if you had to use your leader earlier to get spells and stay alive, you can guarantee your burn damage that way. And so when I side out Raise, I side in Topos. I want to make sure I still have turn enders. Even though there are answers that exist, I'm going to force my opponent to have that answer or give me the next turn. I'm going to move past the next one. I'll explain it later. Beerus Ball and Absolute Release Ball. These are just counter plays that come in depending on the matchup. Beerus Ball is for green. It stops Frieza, the counterplay Frieza. And Absolute Release Ball is for basically everything else because Absolute Release Ball costs 0 mana. I have to be at 4 or less life, and it counterplays a 3 or less being played, putting it back in my opponent's hand, and then untaps an energy. So I can play it for 0 mana, or if I'm tapped out, I can actually play it for -1 mana, take the life, and get the mana back. And so I really like Release Ball over Beerus Ball, but in the off chance I went against green, I had Beerus Ball in there as well. Then finally, the Furthering Destruction Chomper. The whole point of this card was for Red Broly, and also Majin Vegeta, in case I saw it, but I assumed I would see Red Broly before I would see Majin Vegeta. So those decks, your win conditions, you side them out. You side out Victory Strike and you side out your 6-drops. Because by the time you get to turn 5, 2 damage is enough.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if 2 damage is enough, that means a Champa is also enough. And it takes a lot less setup for a Champa to get in there. Also, when Red Broly uses one of their effects to warp a card from your hand, I like to warp the Champa because they'll start playing defensively. This actually worked. In round 1, as horrible luck as it was, I sat down across the table from a Red Broly player. And in game 2, I warped the Champa. And from that point forward, he didn't take an extra life with Vampa to push another chain. And whenever I attacked him with something, he comboed out of it. And that happened to be just enough for me to gain control back on turn 3 to 4 and kill him on turn 5 with cat blows. And so it did its job. I'm glad I sided it for the simple fact that it ended up working out for me.
That's a really cool strategic move for sure. I do like that a lot. So that's a very good, very in-depth explanation of the sideboard and the matchups. So I really do appreciate it. I'm sure the viewers will also definitely appreciate it. What do you think about Invoker going forward? I mean, we're seeing a little bit of Evo booster stuff. We're seeing a bit of the set 13 stuff. Does anything make you a bit wary about Invoker, or do you still feel solid about it moving forward, considering the stuff we've seen?
Well, I really do think that Invoker is still a very good meta call. Anytime you're going to have a wide meta, Invoker is an excellent choice because any kind of rogue deck struggles against it, and most meta decks struggle against the rival seeker play. They have to side deck for it, and usually your side deck, if they don't specifically side deck for you, they're not going to be ready for you. Things don't overlap really well as far as Invoker goes. You know, it just so happens that the Denial of Hope type spell does overlap with other matches, but in general, things don't overlap very well. And so Invoker tends to be a very strong call. Yes, there is a price issue with Invoker. You know, a quick TCG player look of Apex of Power will show you that if you don't already have it, you probably don't want to pick it up. And there's also a bit of a skill cap. I don't like going around saying that Invoker is, you know, a big brain deck or it requires all of this thinking and thought. There are plenty of decisions that have to be made, plenty of micro decisions, but you know, it's still, if you don't have the deck by now, you're probably not going to play it. But since I do have the deck, I am going to play it.
Gotcha. With that being said, any final shout outs you want to throw out there?
Yeah, I want to shout out the Hermit Style Podcast and their Discord. They're really cool guys, Jimmy and Mike. And shout out my team, Bad Beats CCG, and you for letting me do this deck profile.
No problem, man. Thanks for being on. We'll see you next time.